words, Deltarune pulls us into its reality. A loving voice calls us Kris, reminding us we'll be late for school if we don't get up. The text describing our interactions with objects assigns the bet to us. Looking in the mirror, it affirms it's only you. But this normalcy is a deception, a meticulously constructed facade, because with every step we take in the darkness, with every decision we impose, an undeniable truth breaks through the cracks of reality. Kris and the player are not the same entity. They've been called many things: Blue Person, Christmas, Little Sponge, but only the prophecy whispers their true name: the Cage, with human soul and parts. Forget the discarded vessel from the beginning of the game. Kris is not a mere container. They are the prison of flesh that confines the human soul, limiting its power and what it can see. No, it's not a coincidence that their name, Kris, is a twisted echo of Christ. Today, totally unplanned of course, we'll explore why Kris isn't the savior destined to fulfill a prophecy, but the embodiment of an inverted one. Chapter 1: The Prophet. We all know the name Jesus Christ, but it's crucial to understand that Christ isn't a last name, it's a title. It comes from the Greek Christos, meaning anointed one, which is the translation of the Hebrew Messiah. When people speak of Jesus Christ, they're talking about Jesus, the awaited Messiah in Jewish tradition. The fact that Toby Fox chose such a meaningful name for the main character is no accident. It's common knowledge that names like Napstablook or Asgorg were created with a random English name generator. If he chose to call Kris Kris, there's a symbolic reason. The Messiah is the agent of God's justice, meant to punish evil and oppression and establish a world order based on righteousness and equity. He is the perfect bridge between heaven and earth, a symbol of divine justice. However, the Deltarune prophecy doesn't speak of a Messiah who will bring justice from a benevolent God. It speaks of an angel whose heaven threatens to consume reality. Undertale and Deltarune are parallel stories, with significant changes in each title, but sharing a very similar foundation. The prophecy of the Deltarune appears in both games. In Deltarune, its meaning seems to be well understood, serving as the symbol of a religion filled with prophecies. In Undertale, it's considered prehistoric, its meaning lost to time. Gerson offers two interpretations of this legend. The duality is undeniable. This prophecy has always been about the player, the entity capable of granting freedom or unleashing a genocide. And if in Deltarune, the angel is us, then the Messiah of this story isn't Kris, it's us. And Kris, the being who can rip our soul out at will, who can defy our commands and prevent us from seeing what they don't want us to see, they are the Antichrist, the one who rebels against the Messiah, the one who seeks to negate our actions and repair the damage we cause. The definitive proof comes from Noelle in the Weird Route. In the dead of night, it was Kris who came to assure her that the nightmare we put her through was just that, a nightmare, and that Bertley would recover. This route is the most violent manifestation of Kris's true purpose, a direct attack charged with hatred and resentment against the player. But even on the normal route, their silent insurrection continues. They open dark fountains behind our backs, ignore our commands, and, well, they devour Toriel's entire pie. Therefore, it's essential to understand what is Kris's motivation. Why has a simple student become the centerpiece of a prophetic war? To find out, we must delve into the echoes of their past, into Hometown's whispers about their strange personality. We must descend into the rebel psyche. We must enter Chapter 2, The Mind of the Cage. Kris's uniqueness goes beyond being the only human in Hometown. It lies in their psyche. Adopted by the Dreamers, they grew up in a loving home, but this acceptance only seemed to deepen their feeling of being other. They even asked when their own horns would grow in. The red-horned headband Toriel and Asgore bought them wasn't just a gift, it was Kris's attempt to assimilate into a world they biologically didn't belong to, and they wore it for months. They were always close to Azrael, their brother. They shared games, TV shows, and explorations in the woods with the Holiday Sisters. Despite being universally described as creepy, this word fails to capture their complexity. Kris was known for their pranks, and these pranks had a peculiar edge, throwing smoke bombs into the toilet, hiding under Noelle's bed to fuel her fear of humans under the bed, or lying to her that the mascot Icy was real and ate children, which led to Des hitting Kris with a wiffle bat until they stopped lying. It seems to be something they did often, as Noelle states in chapter 2, in the library, we even find a book from monsters on how to take care of humans, which Toriel has consulted multiple times. And when Kris looks at the picture book with images of other humans, they immediately close it. Despite this introversion, there were failed attempts at connection. Brady recalls how Kris desperately tried to win over the older kids, getting them all the food they asked for, until they got sick. But the most unsettling glimpse into Kris's psyche and their strange connection with the holidays comes from Noelle's blog. She recounts a bizarre event. The Ice E on a pizza box winked at her. The only one who believed her was Des, and her reaction wasn't of comfort, but of violence. She decided to kill the mascot by burning the box. Noelle describes this scene with horror. Ice E's eyes glowed in the fire. It looked evil. Kris was there, digging a hole to bury the remains. The scene was broken when Noelle screamed in fear, and Kris turned to look at her, still holding the icy box, frightening her even more, and causing Des to intervene. Noelle mentions that if readers enjoy these kinds of sightings, they should visit her sister's blog. Kris's interest in the bizarre didn't end there. Their fascination with the dark was well known. Caddy confirms they both studied occultism, mentioning a silent spell she asked them to find, and even that they tried to summon a demon, a fact that resonates strongly in Hometown. Adding to this are their talents. They are a notable pianist, having practiced on the hospital piano, and seem to have watched several piano lesson videos to play video game songs. They also excel at video games, sharing a console kept under Asriel's bed and being good enough to be Birdly in competitive games. After Des's disappearance and Asgore's subsequent divorce, their friendship with Noelle became less frequent. When Asriel left for college, Kris distanced himself from their few remaining friends, though they kept in touch until the internet went out in Hometown. Their side of the room is a testament to this void. The shelves are empty, their children's books donated. It's a dead space. Toriel confirms Kris lives in a state of lethargy, lacking energy. They have a history of not waking up on time and often sleep in until classes start. It's implied that Kris likes to reminisce about their childhood and is unsettled by the idea of growing up. They haven't abandoned their interest in the occult and have looked into how to perform magic, which apparently didn't work as they can't use magic in the dark worlds. Kris's favorite food is Toriel's pie, and they also seem to like sweets, especially chocolate ones. And in that empty room, we find the most damning clue. A birdcage, and next to it, a bloodstain that Susie herself helps us clean. This has fueled the theory that our soul wasn't the first, that Kris had a soul before. A childhood prank remembered by Noelle suddenly becomes terrifying. Kris used to use one of Toriel's heart-shaped pillows to pretend to rip it out of their chest to scare her. What if it wasn't a prank? What if it was a common practice in the past? The control they have lived under detonate after the battle with Spamton Neo. Kris is left visibly in shock. When Spamton screams about being a puppet, about cutting the strings to be free, he isn't reciting a script. He's speaking directly to Kris. The anguish is so palpable that Susie notices. If the player answers yes to being okay, Kris tenses up. If they answer no, Kris screams the response. Spamton's fate deeply disturbed Kris because, in that broken mirror, they saw the strings controlling them. This gives new meaning to their famous naps. Kris isn't just tired, they are exhausted. They use the nights, when the soul is contained in the bloody cage, to execute their own plan. That's why we find them already dressed at the beginning of the game. Their nocturnal actions are deliberate and sinister, slashing Toriel's tires, unleashing a new dark fountain in the living room, and communicating with a mysterious contact by phone, a figure who seems to be pulling the strings of a war we are only beginning to understand. It's easy to label Kris, to brand them with dissociative identity disorder, but Kris is fully aware of our actions. Their distress after the Spamtot Neo battle confirms it. The closest label would be the personalization disorder, the feeling of being a passenger in your own body, a puppet watching its own movements. But this isn't a psychological metaphor. The possession is not fictional. The truth is more terrifying. Kris has lived their entire life under the control of someone or something else. Chapter 3. The Souls. Kris's pranks. That's the word everyone uses to describe their erratic past, but if we analyze them closely, they don't seem like pranks. They seem like alibis, desperate justifications for behaviors they couldn't explain themselves. Let's go back to the Ice E incident. Kris tells Noelle the mascot eats children. Des hits them with a wiffle bat until they admit it's a joke. But there are two chilling details. The bat was left completely bent, and the memory of it still gives Kris headaches. Who would endure real physical pain just to maintain a lie, unless it wasn't a lie? Unless Kris was telling the truth forced by a will that was not their own. The evidence of a prior entity is undeniable. The blood-stained cage in the room is confirmation. Rousey gives us the theological definition of assault. It's unknown if Darkners have souls. In Undertale, a soul takes the shape of a heart. Human souls mostly point down, and monster souls point up. This implies Kris has hosted another soul before the players, which leads us to the most important question in the game: why? Why would someone voluntarily give up their will, their compassion, and their fate? The answer is the driving force behind the entire tragedy of Deltarune: identity dysphoria. Kris is a human raised by monsters. Their desire for the horned headband, their visceral rejection of the book showing them other humans, it all points to a desperate vulnerability, a desire to stop being other, to change their fundamental nature and finally become a monster, just like their family. This desire led them to occultism, not as a game, but as a desperate search. Kris was actively seeking a force capable of altering their human nature, of swapping their human soul for that of a monster. And here, all the pieces converge into a terrifying theory. It's highly probable that one of these rituals, possibly connected to the pizza incident and previous visits to Dark Worlds, was the direct cause of Des getting lost. The childhood wish to belong transforms in an instant into a pathological and unbearable guilt. Kris is now a child who believes they have destroyed the family they loved so much. This pain is reflected in the dark fountain they open in their living room. Rousey states that darkness are inspired by the memory of a loved one, appearing only in a very specific darkness, doubting that Jerson could even appear in Castletown. Tenna was forged from Kris's true feelings, those that cling to a happy and harmonious past, before it was all destroyed by their actions. And how does the child fix such a catastrophe? By completely surrendering to someone, or something, that promises a solution. This is where the most mysterious figure in Hometown comes in: Carol, Des' mother. As the mayor, she seems to know much more than she lets on. It is her whom Kris calls as a last resort, actively preventing us from getting the bunker's code. The same bunker where the Roaring Knight took Undyne. During the moments when Kris removes her soul in the holiday house, we see them talking on the phone. Snippets of the conversation make it clear that this entity has a plan and is giving Kris orders. At the end of the chapter, the soul is locked back in the small cage in the room, and before Kris leaves for another nightly walk, they receive a call similar to the one at the holidays, reminding them not to forget. This doesn't mean Kris is incapable of feeling. Their friendship with Susie and Rousey seems genuine, as they go against the player's actions to save them. They use the night to take Burley to the hospital and smooth things over with Noelle. But no matter what they feel, it's not just the player controlling Kris. They live under another puppet here. Their desire to be a monster condemned them to serve a dark power, and their guilt keeps them a willing prisoner, an Antichrist, serving a sinister cause, moving the pieces in the dark long before we, the player, arrive to take control. Following Chapter 4. The Demon's Route. The Dark Fountains give us a foreshadowing, but what if I told you there's another prophecy, one presented to us in Chapter 3, not as a simple game, but as a coded confession, the outcome the Dark Entity truly seeks. Regardless of the route, Chapter 3 introduces the Sword Route, a hidden minigame described by Ram as the original version called Mantle without tennis censorship, and what it shows is chilling. Here, Kris is not a hero, they are an executioner. They get a sword and unleash a massacre with it. it. They grow stronger by annihilating enemies that are distorted echoes of Hometown. A monster with horns like Toriel, lizards like Alphys, birds like Birdly, or fish like Undyne. It's a literal repetition of Undertale's genocide route. The game even seems to be governed by the same level of violence system. On the first board, Kris becomes so strong that they break the game's limits and find the Ice Key. With it, they access the Ice Palace, and what we see on the door is a perversion of the prophecy, the Deltarune, but with demon wings and a third triangle touching the angel, corrupting it. This level can only be passed with the help of White Cloak, who looks very similar to Noelle and attacks with ice powers identical to those she has in Chapter 2. Upon opening the final door, you get the shelter key, curiously marked with the color pink, just like Susie's. The wielder of the Shadow Mantle is pleased that you found it, thanking Kris for their hard work and assuring them this is no coincidence. It's what happens in the weird route. The Ice Palace turns out to be Noelle's house, and the shelter key is the code Susie finds on Dessa's guitar. Therefore, the third board shows us something that hasn't happened in the game yet. Kris gets the sword again, and this time finishes off Rouse and Susie to start leveling up. They annihilate everyone, even monsters that don't fight back, and descend into the shelter, the bunker. There, the wielder of the Shadow Mantle confronts them. This being claims Kris's motivation is to have fun, and even seems aware if Kris did the weird route, admitting they can't say it was really them, revealing they also know about the player's control over Kris. After a battle in which Friend appears and the eyes of the Titans flood the screen, this being is pleased and says, the being controlling this entity is training the player, wanting them to face enemies as powerful as those to come. This third game seems to be a premonition of what will happen in Chapter 5. A yellow monster shooting red arrows downward, surrounded by flowers, is a clear reference to Asgore attacking, coinciding with the prophecy that places him as the next boss to face. Defeating a singing cat identical to Catty provokes the wrath of the other cats. In one of the rooms, we even find 3 monsters similar to Alphys surrounding a gray fish. When you destroy it, the Alphys-like monsters destroy themselves, a hint that on this route, Undyne might turn into a goner, and Alphys will try to save her, even at the cost of her own life. We also see a black monster that mimics the player's actions and is in an inaccessible area. Upon solving the puzzle and opening the path, it too is destroyed by the sword. Many associate this monster with Des, which may imply that even if she is successfully brought back from the dark place she was confined to, her life may be instantly ended by Kris. This is the ultimate tragedy of the Pact. Even if Kris manages to find Des, the power they obtain to do so will force them to destroy her. The sword route shows us the corrupted Deltarune, the path that goes beyond morality. We saw that Kris can stand up to the player. They do so with fury after the Thorn Ring incident. But why do they put the soul back in? Why do they allow the weird route to continue? Because the weird route and the pacifist route are, in essence, the same path. Kris doesn't stop the genocidal player because the goal of whoever is controlling them is for the prophecy to be fulfilled, regardless of whether it has been corrupted. The player is a being capable of imposing their will, with a determination so strong as to either prevent the roaring or cause it, connecting the heaven with the earthly world or banishing it. Kris is the Antichrist, yes, but not because they are a hero or are trying to prevent an apocalypse. Kris is bound by a debt and the guilt of having destroyed their family and friends. They are a lead actor who can only follow the script, even if it means they must destroy everyone they love. No matter how much they want to leave or abandon their deal, the words resonate. But this leaves us with one last unsettling question. In Undertale, we weren't the first human to fall. What if in Deltarune, we aren't the first soul? What if all of Kris's pranks and erratic personality were the echoes of other human souls, other attempts by this demon to achieve its goal? Souls that, like ours, were used and discarded. That would explain why everyone refers to Kris with they-them pronouns. They know there's Kris, and then there's an external will. That's why Kris closes the Book of Humans upon seeing the pictures, not because they don't identify with them, but because the guilt of having used so many human souls is eating them up inside. But let's go further. What if we are just the last attempt? The final soul that, just like in Undertale, holds the key, not only to fulfilling the prophecy, but to freeing everyone. But that's a topic for another video. So if you want me to dedicate a full video to this topic, let me know in the comments.